Hi, I'm Patrick Barnard, Group Managing Editor for TMCnet, coming to you live from IT Expo. And I'm joined by Tim Saunders, Vice President of Product Management for Adtran. How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing great. How
Good.
you doing?
Welcome.
Thank you.
So I understand you guys have been broadening out your portfolio of solutions quite a bit. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and one of the areas that you're seeing a lot of growth is in products related to SIP trunking and adoption of SIP-based services. So tell me a little bit about the growth in that area and what you guys are seeing.
Yeah, okay, so we're seeing a lot of growth specifically through our Tier 1 carrier customers. We sell solutions that are used to terminate a carrier SIP trunk service, whether it's to feed a traditional PBX or directly into an IP PBX or even part of a hosted solution.
Right.
Initially, that had been pretty much the domain of competitive carriers. When they went out to do business, they were trying to sell a SIP trunk service.
Right.
The Tier 1 carriers were using it mainly as a win-back or if they got specifically asked for it. What we're seeing now is that Tier 1 carriers are now leading with that to not only SMBs, but to large distributed enterprises to try to win business using SIP trunk services.
Okay, great. So tell me a little bit about the appliances and the various products that you sell that help facilitate this.
Okay. They fit into two camps. We call them IP business gateways, or some people call them integrated access devices, or IADs. And usually these are part and parcel of the carrier's service offering. So even though it's deployed inside the business and plugged into the wall, it still belongs to the carrier.
Okay.
And what it does is it terminates their SIP trunk service, but then will feed a traditional trunk to the PBX, like a PRI circuit or analog station, so the customer is not forced to make a change in their PBX or phone numbers or the phones on the desks. What we've seen in that space is an increase in the amount of bandwidth needed. Not so much for the voice, because that's fixed based on how many users there are, but the device serves to terminate both the internet access and the voice services, so we're being driven to have a bigger, more powerful router in those gateways than we had in the past.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Good. And that's interesting you say about the Tier 1 carriers actually providing their own device. I mean, it's much the same way, a cable service provider provides the set-top box
Right.
for the customer. Obviously, you got to have the proper device in place in order to be able to transcode the services that are being delivered. On the other hand, enterprises also have the opportunity to buy their own boxes that transcode or are interoperable with a wide variety of other SIP services that are out there. What's sort of the difference between those two approaches? Why do the Tier 1 carriers want to go with bringing their own appliance inside your premise?
It is by far driven by interoperability concerns. SIP is a standard, and everybody who's developing a component that implements SIP believes that they're doing it correctly and properly. But in fact, there are nuances associated with some things that may not be as mainstream as making a phone call, but lighting a message waiting indicator or showing busy lamp field, that everybody has their own sort of nuance. So what the carrier wants to do is say, I have this gear in my network that I'm using to deploy SIP, and I have this gear at the customer premises to terminate SIP, and I want to standardize on a software version for each and ensure interoperability, and that drives them to go ahead and say, okay, I'm personally standardizing on this set of gear, and it will always be deployed this way, and I don't have to worry that a customer may be putting something on the network that isn't quite standard, or at least or is compatible with what I've deployed.
So in that regard, it helps them ensure quality.
Exactly.
I mean, the box that they're deploying on their end, at their endpoint of their network, it talks their flavor of SIP, so to speak.
And you think about it, especially in the SMB space, they don't really care. They want voice service to be good. They want dynamic bandwidth that can come with SIP services where if you're not using the phones, the data bandwidth actually speeds up. And they don't really care about selecting the piece of CPE or gear in the network. They just want that service to be there. And since they're not concerned about that, then the carrier can go ahead and deploy it and know that it's going to be a good customer experience.
Sure, and it's also one less piece of equipment for the internal IT team to have to deal with.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly,
Okay,
yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And what else are you guys seeing with regard to adoption of SIP trunking and obviously the big push on for UC?
Yeah.
What are some of the other ways that you guys are benefiting from this?
Well, so a couple of things. One is that for the longest time, people talked about SIP trunk with a couple of flavors to it. One is the one I was talking about where you feed a traditional PBX, but also a hosted model where really the customer doesn't own a PBX or maintain or manage it. That's all in the carrier cloud, and customer has phones on their desk and some other CPE.
Right.
We are now starting to see some traction with that. It had been around for a while, but now some deployments and some traction being made in that space. And I guess they got their pricing models right, and the value proposition is now being seen. So we're seeing, I don't know that it'll ever overtake a premises-based solution, but it's certainly getting some more traction. And the other area that's starting to catch up is, for years now, the sale of IP PBXs has overtaken the sale of TDM PBXs.
Right.
Yet, the IP part of it was kind of resigned to the LAN, and still you access the network using traditional TDM.
Right.
When you didn't need to.
Right.
And now we're starting to see, again, some customers taking direct SIP trunks into their PBX directly and not needing that ancillary extra box in the middle, and so we're benefiting from that.
Sure, yeah, and of course this is especially true for organizations that have, multi-locations, obviously companies that are, got a lot of geographically dispersed around the globe.
Exactly. Adtran is in a smaller version of these multi-site locations, but we get 4 or 5 offices around the country that we're deployed SIP trunks to and reaching them and have, basically 4-digit dial and find me, follow me, and all that around all the different locations we have.
Right. Now, you guys have significantly broadened your portfolio in recent years, and it seems like Adtran's approach is to really develop purpose-built appliances that are designed to meet specific needs rather than taking the approach of, we're going to build one appliance that does everything, right?
Yeah.
So you got this big broadening of the portfolio, aren't I right? And how many products are you up to now?
I think we have 1,500 different part numbers in our system, which is it's a good thing from the customer perspective, because they basically are getting the solution that fits them and not having to pay extra for something that doesn't necessarily apply to them. We took a strategy a while back of saying we're going to go into the business and try to provide networking solutions, whether it's hardware or services, for everything that moves bits around. So when you get into that, now you're into the router space, you're into the UC space, switches, wireless, and so on.
Right.
And it's been a fun ride. I mean, the company is kind of built that way to try to provide purpose-built solutions. We're a very engineering-centric company,
right?
And it's resulted in a pretty broad portfolio of solutions for us.
Right, and that keeps you nimble,
it
keeps
does.
you flexible. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Good. So I understand you're going to be participating in some sessions here, presenting at some sessions here at IT Expo. Talk a little bit about those. Okay,
so one of the sessions is entitled SIP trunking for the SMB, making the business case for the SMB, and there's a couple other participants where we'll be trying to explain the benefits of SIP trunking and the value that it portrays to the SMB, and also touch on some of the inhibitors and what we're doing about that, as well as where SIP trunking is headed in the future.
Okay, and there's another session you're going to be leading as well?
So there's another session on HD voice, and there's a number of HD voice handset providers in that space that are going to be talking, and again, the same sort of value proposition and benefits that it can provide to different businesses and that sort of thing. So I'm excited about that.
What's your take on HD voice? Do you think it's going to really start to take off in the enterprise space soon, or?
I'm optimistic. If you listen to it, it sounds great.
Right.
It absolutely sounds great.
Yeah.
I don't know that it necessarily was driven by a pressing need to solve a problem, but it's there, it's affordable, it's better, and so I do believe it's going to be sort of the de facto approach to delivering audio going forward.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of people use the term wideband interchangeably with it,
right.
But really what it does is it delivers greater dynamic range for the voice signal, correct? I mean,
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So. And there's a lot of benefit to that. Now, when you do that internally in the organization, you can benefit from it a lot.
Yeah.
The big question is, though, if you're talking about a voice signal that's, hopped across a bunch of different networks, sort of hard to guarantee the end-to-end wideband factor, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's exactly true. And so I guess you just go from our experience. You still, it's obviously better in a totally internal environment, but we've seen it work real well across the wide area in public internet even. So.
Sure, yeah, and once the big carriers begin to adopt it and deploy it, then I guess that would probably be sort of the big step towards really seeing it take off and really become a reality.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. Okay, well, we've been talking to Tim Saunders, Vice President of Product Management for Adtran, here at IT Expo West, live in Los Angeles. Thanks very much, Tim, for joining us.
All right, thank you.
All right, take care.
Appreciate it.